Welcome to the Fiddler's Galaxy recorded webinar, Is it Chronic Behavior? What Can I Do? Presented by me, Caroline Reddy. So the webinar takeaways for you today are: 1, we're going to investigate why chronic misbehavior is occurring. 2, we're going to look at some tools to collect and analyze misbehavior data. 3, you're going to learn some strategies to build long-term positive relationships with all your students that's going to help manage that misbehavior. And so we look at this little cartoon over here. The principal's like, I thought you were going to make a list of only those behaviors that are most in need of change. Teacher's like, I did. This is it. So we may feel like misbehavior is making us want to scream. And misbehavior, early stage, misbehavior can easily become chronic behavior. A majority of discipline problems can either be prevented or redirected to positive behavior. Students may have problems and they act out their frustrations in class and make life miserable for both their teachers and other students. So chronic means it's persisting for a long time or constantly reoccurring. It's habitual. And misbehavior is any action or conduct that is inappropriate, improper, incorrect, or unexpected. So chronic misbehavior is a motivated behavior because behavior does not reoccur when there's no motivation. So behaviors become chronic when they are ongoing and persistent. And many times students engage in chronic misbehavior because it has become a habit. So why do students misbehave? Well, when we are confronted with chronic ongoing misbehaviors, we, the teachers, need to become detectives and investigate why the behavior is occurring. So let's do a little investigation. Let's think about why could the chronic misbehavior be occurring? Well, it could be that students have a lack of something. Maybe they lack the ability. It could be something that's physical, neurological, or simply not taught. Could be an awareness problem, such as the student just doesn't know exactly what you expect, and so they're going to do whatever. And if the student doesn't know what they're doing, is a misbehavior. Now, we can take care of an awareness problem for not knowing what to expect when we use our CHAMPS expectations. Be very clear, concise, and direct about what responsible behavior looks like and sounds like. If it's a lack of ability or awareness, we can work to shape the behavior, but let's have a caution. We need to be realistic in our expectations of students. Students with a physical, neurological, or other disability may not be able to meet your demands. Working with the student, we can modify our expectations while still holding high standards for the student. So some misbehavior is attention seeking. So maybe the student is seeking adult attention, or maybe it's peer attention. They want attention, and that's a natural thing. People want to be noticed and paid attention to. But we have some students who learn that by misbehaving, I get more intense, emotional, and satisfying attention than if I'm behaving as the expectations ask me to. Another one that a reason they might be misbehaving is because they want power and control or revenge. Or it could be that there's a competing reinforcer. So something like the teacher who says to the parent, your son pays attention in class, but only to his iPod and cell phone. So competing reinforcer is one where it's reinforcing and it's in competition with other reinforcing activities, and so which one is stronger is kind of going to get the students' attention and might be considered a misbehavior. So we have avoidance seeking behaviors, which could be because students just want to get out of the work. They want to get out of the activity. They want to get out of whatever's going on in the moment. Well, that could be because the work is too hard. It could be because it's too easy and it's kind of boring. It also could be that they want to avoid failure. So think about it. If a student is constantly trying to get out of completing work, they might be escaping to the bathroom, they might cause a disruption, they don't like math, so they constantly cause a disruption in math, hoping to get removed from the math class so they don't have to complete the work. So that could be avoidance seeking. So attention seeking behaviors can be either active or passive. So active attention seekers use lots of different techniques to gain attention, such as tapping their pencils, talking or yelling out of turn. Maybe they're just tardy to class consistently. They like to pass notes. They don't do it very discreetly. They might trip classmates or bother classmates. They're constantly pleading for help while others are getting to work. So they're actively seeking out our attention through disruptive behaviors. Passive attention seekers, though, are kind of our dawdlers or laggers. They're not disrupting the flow of the class. They're not disrupting the other students around them, but they're the ones that are just kind of, we have to pull along. They're very slow to complete directions. They're the last to open their books. They're the ones lagging behind in line, 10 feet behind the last person, and they're kind of kicking and shuffling their feet down the hallway. They're the last ones coming in the door, and they do it very slowly. So we feel like we're constantly having to pull them along or get them going. So some clues of how you know that this is attention-seeking behavior is that it causes teacher irritation and annoyance. Our emotional pressure gauge might read mild because we're just really annoyed or irritated. And we typically react to these behaviors by verbal reprimands, nagging, cajoling, scolding. So we're using our words to discipline. And when we do reprimand, because we kind of give an intense reprimand to the student, the behavior stops temporarily, but it'll come back because we've only stopped the behavior for a very short time. Interventions we can use are to minimize our attention for misbehaviors and instead focus on the responsible, appropriate behaviors. So instead of giving Johnny intense attention for misbehaviors, we want to replace it by giving them as much intense behavior or attention for responsible behaviors as we can. The next thing is we're going to clarify the desired behavior, and I want to give you something called a target stop do message. We're going to think about this little process when we tell students to stop a misbehavior and then what to do. So we're going to target the student by saying their name. Then we're going to tell them exactly what we need them to stop, identify that behavior. And then tell them what they're supposed to be doing, which is the replacement behavior. So for example, Janessa, stop talking to David and get to work on your math problem. So I used her name, target. I told her to stop talking to David, that was the stop, and then I gave her the do, tell her what to do. So it's very clear, Janessa, stop talking to David and get to work on your math problem. We make a mistake of being too general or vague. So something like, hey, get to work. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to get to work? Does it mean I'm supposed to be digging something out of my desk? Maybe I need to go get my supplies or sharpen my pencil. I could consider all of those things getting to work, but that's not what we really mean. What we mean is pick up your pencil and start working on the math problem in front of you. So we want to make sure that we are concise, explicit, and clear with your behavior messages. So another thing we can do is modify your response to misbehaviors. So you might think about doing a little self-reflection. What am I doing that's motivating these chronic misbehaviors? So for example, Students are calling out. Are you answering them and ignoring students with raised hands? So when Timon acts out by burping loudly in class, do you respond with personal attention and emotional intensity and investment? You may need to reflect on how you can modify your response when passive attention seekers lag behind or slow to engage in activity. So are you going over and spending a lot of time emotionally investing in the student to kind of cajole them to get going, instead of putting the responsibility on them to get themselves involved? So we have to think about how are our responses reinforcing those misbehaviors. And then we also want to teach students how to correctly ask for attention. So we may have students who the only way they've ever gotten attention is by calling out, by yelling, by disrupting, by acting inappropriate or misbehaving. And that's the only kind of tool they know to get your attention. Well, maybe what we need to do then is teach them the positive, correct, socially acceptable ways to ask for attention. So we have to think about how can I teach them if they really want my help and need my attention. How can they do it in a positive way that's not misbehaving or disrupting class? And then you might think, oh, I need to implement some unpleasant mild consequences for continued misbehavior. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on control and power-seeking behaviors, but some of you have them in your classrooms. So you may see them do things like students are going to use their words and actions to prove that they are in control, not the teachers. So they might do things like cry, kick, refuse to listen, talk back in a disrespectful and defiant manner. If you have passive students, they're not maybe throwing a temper tantrum, yelling out, but they're only going to comply on their terms. They seem to be spiting you. So how do I know if that's what's going on? Well, usually you walk away with anger, you're frustrated, and you might even think, I'm losing control of the situation, and you kind of have a dread of that. Your gut reaction is to fight back with words or to just give in and give up. Behavior doesn't stop when you reprimand. In fact, the behavior only stops on their terms. Those are some clues that you might have a power control seeking motivation behind the misbehavior. So revenge seeking behaviors, the students are kind of retaliating against real or imagined hurts that the teacher has done. So it could be in response to a power struggle with the student, or they could feel slighted by the teacher, even if the teacher, it was unintentional that the teacher did this. And so we think about some of the things that they might do. Active revenge could include their ripping off bulletin board items. Maybe they rip up a book. Maybe they try to destroy or deface something. They draw all over it. Maybe it's a verbal attack, and it could even get into threatening physical harm. Please remember, if they threaten you, take all threats seriously and make sure you notify your administrator as soon as possible. Passive revenge could include the students becoming withdrawn and sullen. They're uncommunicative. They're the ones they kind of shut down. Maybe they put their hoods over their head. They refuse to talk to you. And the lack of response is really meant to hurt you and frustrate you. So how do you know if it's revenge seeking? So power seeking, remember, you were angry, you were frustrated, you wanted to fight back. Well, in revenge seeking, you probably feel really hurt, disappointed. You may even just really dislike this student. Your gut reaction is to punish them. And if I could just punish them enough, this would work out better. The revenge behavior doesn't stop quickly or easily, and again, it only ends on the student's terms. So here's some interventions. Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. Usually it's not about you. You're just the target because you're there. Another one is acknowledge that students have power and you can't actually make them do something. When we give up the control, the student has nothing to resist. For example, Carlos, you're right. I can't make you do the math problems. It is expected you do the math problems, but I can't actually make you. Then the student has nothing to fight against. Give legitimate power by giving choice. So you could say, Carlos, you can work on your math problems here, working quietly, or you can work on your math problems in Mr. Johnson's class next door. You decide. Not necessarily a punishment, it's a choice. Or you might say, Carlos, you can do it at your desk, or you can work over there at the round table, and you can work quietly over there. Give them a choice. Sometimes students react with control seeking because they have so little control. And if we give them the control, it takes care of it. Another thing we could do is table the matter. Tabling the matter is used if you'd like to discuss what happened with the student, but at another time. So right now, it's not the right time, it's not the right place. So for example, I'm not going to discuss this with you right now. See me after class. So you know those students, they want to argue with you about everything. And that's maybe they're looking to control it. They get some power. So they want to say, why do I have to do this? This is stupid. I don't understand. You know, you're not a good teacher. Okay, I don't want to get sucked into that conversation. So you could say, you know what? I can't discuss this with you right now. So see me after class. Then we can discuss it. Deliver a closing statement. So when a student has attempted to continue engaging you in an argument, you're going to deliver a closing statement. It's just kind of like the final word, this conversation is done. So an example might include, unless you have something new to add, this conversation is finished. Or you might say, we're not talking about this further. Discussion's ended. You could also use a fogging technique when student has said something hurtful or inflammatory. Basically what you're going to do is respond as if what they said is of little or no importance. Remember, what they're trying to do is hurt you. They're trying to hurt your feelings. They're trying to make you upset. And so when you downplay that challenge or personal attack and stick to the topic, then you take away that power that they have. So for example, you could say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Please take out your book and begin your math problems. Well, you're stupid and you're the worst teacher ever. I'm sorry you feel that way. Take out your math book and begin working on the math problems. By not responding, you give them nothing to argue against. So for avoidance-seeking behaviors, these are those students, as we said, who find the schoolwork too easy, they become bored, or they have too much time. Or we have students who seek to avoid schoolwork or situations where they feel failure. So think about quality differentiated work. And if you have any questions about quality differentiated work, Fiddler's offers some amazing online professional development courses that dig into differentiated instruction. There's a general differentiated instruction, there's ones for math, there's one for science. So there's definitely places where you could learn if you need help with differentiating work for students. You could also include meaningful sponge activities or extension learning activities that can assist with those students who misbehave because work was too easy and they're done or they're bored. And so we have students who are really, really gifted who are many behavior problems because they're bored. The students who misbehave to avoid schoolwork or escape situations where they feel failure are the students we're going to address next. So students may choose isolation instead of interacting with peers and teachers. These students may view failure as impossible if they do not try or complete the task. So if I can't actually fail if I didn't try. I'm not the failure. See, I failed this test because I didn't really try versus I failed this test and I tried, and what does that say about me? So see what I'm saying? They think I control the failure. So for an example, I had a student who would wait until the last 10 minutes to complete unit assessment tests. And they take more than 10 minutes to do well. And I would go around, I'd encourage him, and didn't matter what I did, he'd sit there drawing on his test booklet until 10 minutes before the test was over. And then he'd open it up and he would just sort of like Christmas tree in it. And so after seeing him do this a couple of times, pulled him in, we had a conference, and found out that he knew that if I didn't try, I knew I was going to get an F, but it's because I didn't try. And he was really afraid that if he tried his best and he failed, then that would say something about him. I failed. So there's a difference, and there's that subtle shift we have to think about. So encouraging them to take those risks, have a growth mindset, and learning from mistakes. Failure is definitely an option. We teach that because it's through failures that we learn. So then we may have students who also throw frustration temper tantrums when they're pushed to participate. So you have those students who, right, you tell them it's, come on, join in, and they throw a temper tantrum. So how do you know? Well, you might be walking away feeling professional concern, frustration, or even despair. You feel as though you just can't get through to that student, and the reaction may be just a desire to give up. They're stuck. When the student is left alone, the teacher finally gives up on them. They just continue to avoid the task. So those are kind of those clues that we can look at when we're just trying to decide, is this an avoidance-seeking behavior? So interventions are growth mindset, right? Encouraging positive self-talk. Reframe I can't, right? So get rid of I can't by countering it with, of course you can, how can I help? Or instead of saying, with encouraging positive talk, instead of saying, I'm so stupid, say, okay, for every put down statement, you have to say 2 put-ups or 2 positive things. I'm good at drawing, or I have lots of friends. I made it to school on time today. Whatever it is, it needs to be, and we have to model and encourage positive self-talk for students. That teaching growth mindset is so important. Focus on effort and perseverance instead of on the outcomes. Get them to reframe failure as the opportunity to learn, and teach them about the power of not yet. You might also provide time to have a discussion with your student or students. It should be kind of an investigative conversation, and the goal here is to really listen to the student. Some students aren't even aware that they are intentionally sabotaging or setting themselves up for failure. Maybe we need to modify our instructional methods. So we might think about using quality differentiation or a variety of instructional methods to make the content more accessible and meet the needs of those various learners in the room. So thinking of UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. If you want to know more about Universal Design for Learning, again, contact Fiddlers. We have book studies we can do and training that we can do to help you understand more about differentiation and designing your lessons to meet the needs of all of the learners that walk into your classroom. You might also need to teach them the procedures for becoming unstuck. So how do they ask for help? When they're stuck, just raising your hand can be intimidating. I don't want to let anybody else know I'm stuck. So when they don't know what to do or where to begin, or asked to how to ask for help, we want to teach them what to do when they're needing extra guidance and support. So that was the first section. Remember, our goal was to investigate different types of different reasons for misbehavior, why it's occurring. We also gave you some interventions to try. Now we're going to look at tools to collect and analyze misbehavior data, because when it's become chronic, we want to have an eye towards how can we reduce it And then also think, what interventions might we need to implement? And maybe eventually it's a team problem solving meeting. So we got to collect some data to analyze the misbehavior. So there's a couple things we might use. The first thing is, in the CHAMPS book, there are some observation sheets that you can use. So these are part of the CHAMPS book. If you don't have a CHAMPS book, I know somebody in your school in St. Lucie County for sure, and some of the other counties probably have a book in the library. If not, you can always contact our office, and Fiddlers will be more than happy to provide you with some of these resources. So the first one is a misbehavior recording sheet, and it's really just what it sounds like. It's basically taking a sheet and you're doing a recording of misbehaviors. And we don't want to record every misbehavior. Try to give it a broad category or target. You can do it on one student. You could even collect it on the entire class. Then we have an on-task behavior observation sheet, and this basically looks at the students who are on task. And you can get a sense of how many of your students, what percentage of them, are meaningfully engaged, because as engagement goes up, misbehavior goes down. So the misbehavior recording sheet, again, is used to help you determine whether you need to implement an intervention plan to deal with specific student misbehavior. So it's going to help you identify how often and for what reason you're interacting with students regarding their inappropriate behaviors. It can help you detect patterns to students' misbehaviors, such as time of day, day of the week, individual students who never misbehave. It can give you specific and objective information about the behavior of individual students that you can share with the students and their families. And it can help you decide whether or not you need a class-wide motivation system to increase students' motivation to behave responsibly. And one of our other webinars that we have recorded and on this website is on implementing a class-wide or individual motivation system. Be sure to check that out if you want to know more about using a motivation system. The on-task behavior observation sheet, you use this tool to determine how well the students are using independent work time. And you also use it to identify possible cause of poor work completion rates or misbehavior during independent work time. So remember what I said, as engagement goes up, misbehavior goes down. So you might decide to use this if you're noticing, well, for reading centers, I'm only getting about 20% completion of their work. So I would be wanting to check out how engaged are students with the work. So that might be the place that I use this on-task behavior observation sheet. You can use the data that you've collected along with your hypothesis. So up at the top you see it's the function plus the data. So I'm thinking, is this avoidance? Is it power or revenge? Is it attention seeking? Is it ability, or is it awareness? All of those things, I could look at that, my hypothesis, because I have to guess. I have to make an educated guess, right? They don't come with a badge that says my behavior is attention seeking or my behavior is power or revenge. So we have to make a hypothesis, and then we're going to put that together with our data to decide what are some suggested interventions. Now I gave you some basic interventions to try already, but if it's really chronic and it's really severe, we might have to look at additional interventions that we would use with the student. So this is one that works pretty much across the board, and it is the first line of defense for misbehavior. So if I have a classroom that I'm going in with the teacher and she or he says my class is just misbehaving all the time, I might say we need to start on building a relationship. Right? This is that third part of the webinar. So building a relationship. We want some strategies. So how do you build relationship with that student who has, really At this point, pushed all your buttons. It's almost Christmas break and you just can't wait for those 2 weeks when you do not have to deal with the student. It's kind of like they don't show up, you celebrate. They show up and you just like, oh, my day has just gone downhill. If you have a student like that, this strategy is one you definitely need to implement, because let me tell you something, the students know it. They know you don't like them. And that is, there's no investment for them to behave or meet your expectations. There's an investment for them not to, right? So we want to make sure that we build a positive relationship with all students. And as Randy Sprick has said, you can't dislike kids on company time. So how do you change that? Well, we want to build a positive relationship. We could do something called a 2x10. In the 2x10, you're going to take 2 minutes each day consecutively for 10 days. Now, if you're in high school and you're on a block schedule, this might take you 20 days, right? Because you only see them every other day. So every time you see them, every time consecutively for 10 times in a row, you're going to spend 2 minutes interacting with that student as positively as you can for as long as you can. Now, when you first start, maybe 2 minutes is going to feel like an eternity, and they're not going to interact with you. But you're going to do non-contingent attention. You're going to maybe just ask them how they were. I'm so glad to see you today. And if you're sitting on the inside going, I can't do that, I'm going to tell you, fake it till you make it, right? You've got to do something to build a better relationship with those students. So you maybe ask them how they were, ask them about their lives, ask them about their siblings. Don't tie it to academics. Keep it light, professional, but try to get to know that student with those 2 minutes for 10 consecutive times. And this one has gotten amazing results with some of our hardest students who really seem to not care about the adults. The next one is lots of non-contingent attention. So maybe you're not going to do a 2x10, but you can certainly greet them at the door. You can say hello, give them a smile, ask them how they were. All these ways to just let them know, hey, you're a person, I see you're here, and I'm giving you attention positively for that. Use the boomerang. The boomerang is something I use a lot where we have a student who may have been misbehaving. You might use some pivot praise or looking at the student, giving positive interaction to a student that's right next to them that's doing it correctly. And then I come back around to catch that student doing it well. So we want to make sure that we're giving them lots of opportunities to succeed, right? Not setting them up for failure, but lots of opportunities and noticing when they do it right. So maybe you have a student that you're handing out your PBIS dollars, or you hand out a compliment or a reward of some kind, and that student who's not doing it suddenly, rushes to put it all together and say, I'm doing it, and then they yell out, well, I was doing it, see, you never give me anything. Well, that's when you say something like, I didn't catch you this time, but I'm going to come back in just a minute, looking to see you sitting there with your book open and reading. And then you do it. Come back in a minute. That's the boomerang. So boomerang, you throw it out there, it comes back. The next one is provide some intermittent celebrations. So celebrate the little steps, the baby steps, and the quick wins that you get with students. Don't wait until the very end of the day or the semester or the quarter. Do those intermittent celebrations that let them know, the students know, that you approve of them, that you are proud of them, that you're proud of their efforts and persistence, that's growth mindset, that the outcome will be there eventually. But right now we're going to celebrate each day or each moment that we're putting in our effort, we're putting in our perseverance. So again, just wanted to remind you of our takeaways. So the first one was we investigated why chronic misbehavior occurs. So we gave those functions, right? Awareness, ability. We might have attention-seeking behavior. we have power and revenge, we have avoidance-seeking behaviors, right? All of these behaviors are why it occurs. And usually it's being reinforced, and we have to understand that behavior only reoccurs because it's been reinforced. So I gave you 2 tools to use, some very basic tools to kind of collect and analyze some misbehavior data, very basic ones. If you want to learn more about data tools to collect information about what's really going on in your classroom, we have another webinar where we really look at data tools to collect, thinking about are we going to take this to the problem-solving team. And then some strategies. We just gave you the 2x10, non-contingent attention, intermittent celebrations. These are all strategies to build long-term positive relationships. This is the secret key, positive relationships. It is your superpower in behavior management. Kids that like you will behave better for you. Kids that feel that you like them will work hard for you. They feel like you don't like them, you may not get much out of them. So again, thank you for attending this little webinar from Fiddler's Galaxy. My name is Caroline Redding. You can reach me at caroline.redding@stlucieschools.org if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time.